the world. Everyone has to die because everyone is fully under the control of the material nature. Yet everyone thinks he's independent, that whatever he likes he can do, that he will never meet death, but live forever, and so on. So-called scientists are making various plans by which living entities in the future can live forever. But while they are thus pursuing such scientific knowledge, Yamaraj, in due course of time, will take them away from their business of so-called research. So Yamaraj is death personified, right? So, I mean, we see this in our culture, right? We see there's billions of dollars spent on like anti-aging things, right? All kinds of extend the life. Sometimes people will even want to extend their life even though they're miserable, right? You know, they have so many problems, they still want to live longer, right? There's a billionaire named Brian Johnson, and he said that he's going to live forever. He started this program, and he's gonna live forever, right? He's using algorithms to make a program of, you know, vitamins and treatments and things like that for him so he can live forever. So he's 47 years old now, and he spends about $2 million a year, $2 million a year. And he injects the blood of his son into himself and also into his father, right? So we've heard this before in history, right? It just took a little bit of a different form. Does anybody remember Elizabeth Bathory?
Yeah.
Right? What did she do?
She like bathed in people's blood.
Yeah. Yeah, Elizabeth Bathory. Yeah, she very much wanted to live longer and be younger. Actually had a lover and he was starting to become disinterested. And so she started going to all these different doctors and things, trying to figure out a way she could be younger, she could live longer. And so, you know, she's taking all kinds of potions and things like that. And, you know, they weren't working because aging happens to all of us. And so eventually she started bathing in the blood of virgins, right? And so all her servant girls started disappearing, right? So this is nothing new. You know, that was like, I actually forget when that was, but it was several hundred years ago when she was doing that. And so, yeah, this is nothing new. So the anti-aging industry, that's a $47 billion market. I mean, $47 billion every year is spent on that. So with that in mind, you know, okay, so all this money is being spent to try to live forever, or to at least look younger until you die, right? I mean, you can look at, you know, so many celebrities, they spend so much money on plastic surgery, so they look younger. And then after a while, they start looking very strange, right? Yeah. They just don't look natural any longer because they're just so desperate to hang on to that youth. So with that in mind, but knowing everybody needs to die, I want to ask you all what you would consider a good death. So I remember I had a friend that his mother had passed away, and he was telling me about what it was like when she passed away. And he said, well, she passed away at home, and she was surrounded by, you know, her husband and her children and her grandchildren, and everybody was just there. And you know, she passed peacefully. And I thought, that sounds like a good death. I like that. I hope I go like that. You know, to be surrounded by people that love you. For other people, for some, you know, a lot of different warrior classes throughout history, a good death was considered to be dying in battle, right? You know, and a bad death would be considered, you know, maybe being stabbed in the back or being killed unawares, right? But being able to die with a sword in your hand or your boots on, whatever, that was considered a good death, right? So yeah,
I have to say that Princess Sarah and I we were all talking, just like great that while you're flying, so you know you're dying, so you can chant all the way down. And then Krishna would take you before you go down.
all right, there you go. That's a good one. Yeah, and there's that story of the Beatles, right? They were on the plane and there started being, I think it was George Harrison, yeah, that and she started chanting, sing, chant, and be happy. Do you know what I'm talking about? And he just started chanting like very much because the plane, they thought it was going to go down, but it didn't. So, but yeah, okay, that's a good one. How about anyone? Yes, Grace.
Mahasamadhi.
What is it?
Mahasamadhi.
Mahasamadhi. Okay, why don't you tell us what that is?
Gosh.
Isn't it like when you like willfully choose to have your soul leave your body and you just choose the destination you want to go to?
It does leave your body. Well, string attached, of course.
Yeah. Like a yogi that's super good at doing yoga.
And you can pull it down.
So my understanding is that samadhi is just where you're kind of in a trance state where you're focused. I've never heard the term maha samadhi, but
See? You're one with the divine and your body just needs
and your body just needs to let go.
to. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I mean that is definitely possible. What you're saying, and also what you're saying, right? To be in trance where you're so focused on the Lord, whether personally or impersonally, and that you're able to leave your body at will, or in this case, it sounds like maybe you want to leave at will, but your body has to let go. So, yeah.
I think George Harrison, when he was on there and he was giving himself to God to take him, I think that is the best way.
Yeah.
Because you find purification in yourself and you're having the faith and the belief that whatever is coming up is going to be better. And he also believed in reincarnation. So it's now this is over and I'm coming back the next time. Better way.
Okay, nice. How about anyone else? Have any thoughts on what would make a good
In your sleep.
more sleep?
In your sleep.
Oh, in your sleep? Yeah. A lot of people would like that. Yeah. Peaceful in your sleep. Yeah.
I think a good death would be in the light part of the year.
Okay.
And during the light fortnight.
Right.
Of the months.
Yeah. That's what it says in the Bhagavad Gita. Yes.
Oh, does it?
Yeah. I know you didn't know that. Yeah. Okay. So that would be a good death. How about you, Jamuna? No, nothing. You're gonna live forever with this billionaire guy.
Oh, I like the way Donagiri left. She had a blood on the mom's full of blood on the gel on her. Or something.
Who was it?
Wait, Donagiri?
Oh, Donna Kelly. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Very nice.
And also on the Kawasaki last edition.
Yeah, and also what was the nice Prabhu that Vaikuntanath Prabhu. Yeah, that was nice. All the devotees came around and he had tila and ganga water and everybody was chanting. Yeah.
For me, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Except for I'm gonna die first. So, so you'll chant for me. Okay, we'll see. All right. All right. All right. So those are all different ideas of what makes a good death. Unfortunately, death brings out the worst oftentimes in a family, right? We see a lot of stories like this where people will fight over an inheritance, right? Sometimes they'll even kill for it, right? There's so many stories like that. One of my, and even if you don't kill for that inheritance, sometimes that inheritance is completely mismanaged, right? One of my favorite books before I started trying to become a devotee was The Good Earth. Has anybody read that book? All right, yeah. So it's a Pulitzer Prize winning novel that came out a long time ago. It was quite old. I think it came out in the
70s.
I think it was written before then, though.
That's when I read it.
Yeah. I think it was written shortly after the kind of most recent revolution in China. I don't know exactly when that was, if anybody's actually.
The Triumph was 1949.
Okay,
The what?
so
The Triumph of Chairman Mao's Revolution.
yeah. So it was written, probably around that time.
1948, Chiang Kai-shek and him split ways, and he went to China. Chiang Kai-shek did, and then it was another year, 1949, that he really took over in 1948. That he closed all the gates and went right into the end.
Yeah,
That's when 1949. And actually, he closed them twice. He closed them that time, and then he closed them again in 1956.
okay. Yeah, so it was written a little bit around that time, maybe a little before, a little bit after, because Pearl S. Buck, the author, her parents were missionaries, Christian missionaries in China, and so she lived in China as a little girl, and then they had to leave during that time.
56.
But in that book, the basic premise is it's a poor farmer, and he marries a lowly slave woman, and through their mutual hard work and diligence, they end up becoming very wealthy. And part of how they become wealthy is the aristocrats of that time. They're on the decline, right? Because they were very wealthy, but now the money's starting to run out, and all of the younger princes of that family, they keep thinking, they say this one line, surely there's enough still for me, right? And they keep coming back and taking the money or the resources and thinking, well, surely there's still enough for my lifetime. And ultimately that whole aristocratic family becomes penniless, and the poor farmer ends up being able to buy their land. And so he becomes very wealthy, and the wealth kind of corrupts him. Through a lot of struggle, at the end, before death, he kind of realizes the error of his ways and tries to make amends. Deathbed, sons, don't sell the land. Whatever you do, don't sell the land. This is where we come from. This land that's how the other aristocratic family fell. They were selling their land off. And so his sons are like shaking their heads. Don't worry, Dad, we're not going to sell the land. We're not going to sell the land. But behind his back, over his head, they're looking at each other and, saying, oh yeah, we're going to sell this land, right? And so everything that farmer worked for was for naught. His kids grew up rich, spoiled rich kids, and then they completely just threw away their inheritance, although it seemed like they were enjoying it, And so these are the kind of things that can happen when people die. So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the third canto, it talks about the attached householder. What happens to the attached householder when they die? And so an attached householder is, I'll just read. This is from the 30th chapter in the third canto. The attached householder remains in his family life, which is full of diplomacy and politics, always spreading miseries and controlled by acts of sense gratification. He acts just to counteract the reactions of all his miseries. How many of you can identify with that, right? You act just to counteract the reaction of all your miseries, right? Something goes wrong, you do something to fix that one thing. Okay, now something else goes wrong. Now you're working to fix that thing, right? Sometimes you call it, robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? Okay, and if he can successfully counteract such miseries, he thinks that he is happy. He secures money by committing violence here and there, and although he employs it in the service of his family, he himself eats only a little portion of the food thus purchased, and he goes to hell for those whom he earned the money for in such an irregular way. When he suffers reverses in his occupation, he tries again and again to improve himself. But when he is baffled in all attempts and is ruined, he accepts money from others because of excessive greed. So we see this, so many people are in massive amounts of debt right now, right? I mean, it's just like a plague, at least in this country. People are just living beyond their means, right? Because they're attached to these sense objects, are attached to gratifying their senses, and they're attached to pleasing their families without really understanding what is best for them. So that's the unfortunate man, so unsuccessful in maintaining his family members, is bereft of all beauty. He always thinks of his failure, grieving very deeply. Seeing him unable to support them, his wife and others do not treat him with the same respect as before, even as miserly farmers do not accord the same treatment to their old and worn out oxen. The foolish family man does not become averse to family life, although he is maintained by those whom he once maintained. Deformed by the influence of old age, he prepares himself to meet ultimate death. Thus he remains at home, just like a pet dog, and eats whatever is so negligently given to him. Afflicted with many illnesses such as dyspepsia and loss of appetite, he eats only very small morsels of food, and he becomes an invalid who cannot work anymore. So that's pretty harsh, right? He stays at home like a pet dog. But I mean, I've seen this. I've personally seen this, when people start to age, they're just not, sometimes, not always, but so they're just not taken care of the way that they were previously taking care of the others, right? This is why we have so many people staying in elderly care homes, right? Old folks homes, right? Even though they spent so much of their life caring for the younger generation, now they're sort of just put in these homes and forgotten about. There's so many people that I know that work in old folks homes, and they say it's really sad, like on visiting day, like how many of the residents have nobody to come visit them, right? Okay. In that disease condition, one's eyes bulge due to the pressure of air from within, and his glands become congested with mucus. He has difficulty breathing, and upon exhaling and inhaling, he produces a sound like "gah, gah," a rattling within the throat. Not very good at sound effects. In this way, he comes under the clutches of death and lies down, surrounded by lamenting friends and relatives. And although he wants to speak with them, he no longer can because he's under the control of time. Thus, the man who engaged with uncontrolled senses in maintaining a family dies in great grief, seeing his relatives crying. He dies most pathetically, in great pain and without consciousness. I mean, so he kind of died that good death that I was thinking about. He's surrounded by his loved ones. They're crying, they're sad. I thought, oh, that would be good to be surrounded by my loved ones. Well, let's see what happens to him. Okay, at death, he sees the messenger of the Lord of Death. That's Yamaraj, who we talked about before. Come before him, their eyes full of wrath, and in great fear he passes stool and urine. As a criminal is arrested for punishment, the constables of the state, a person engaged in criminal sense gratification, is similarly arrested by the Yamadutas, who bind him by the neck with strong rope and cover his subtle body so that he may undergo severe punishment. So the Yamadutas are kind of death's helpers. They're his messengers. And they come and pick you up and take you to Yamaraj. So it can be like a little trial. All right. While carried by the constables of Yamaraj, he is overwhelmed and trembles in their hands. While passing on the road, he is bitten by dogs, and he can remember the sinful activities of his life. He is thus terribly distressed. Now, there's some stories, people that work in hospice, they talk about people when they pass. It's very common for people to see things when they pass. And a lot of people will see nice things, maybe friends or loved ones coming. But there's so, a percentage that we'll see like dogs and scary figures that are very much what is described here, like the Yamadutas and the dogs biting them. And this is, people that don't necessarily have any faith in, or maybe they have a faith that's, not anything to do with Bhagavatam, but yet they still see these things, right? Okay. Under the scorching sun, the criminal has to pass through roads of hot sand with forest fires on both sides. So they're going to LA, I guess. I'm sorry, that was saying out too soon. He is whipped on the back by constables because of his inability to thirst. But unfortunately, there is no drinking water. While passing on that road to the abode of Yamaraj, he falls down in fatigue and sometimes becomes unconscious. But he is forced to rise again. And in this way, he is quickly brought to the presence of Yamaraj. Thus, he had to pass 99,000 yojanas within 2 or 3 moments, and then he is at once engaged in the torturous punishment which he is destined to suffer. So I wanted to know, how big is a yojana? Does anyone know? Yeah, and it's 8 or 9 miles is what I read. So like almost 900,000 miles, right? Yeah. Okay. Then he is at once engaged in the torturous punishment which he is destined to suffer. He is placed in the midst of burning pieces of wood, and his limbs are set on fire. In some cases, he is made to eat his own flesh, or have it eaten by others. His entrails are pulled out by the hounds and vultures of hell, even though he is still alive to see it, and he is subjected by scorpions, gnats, and other creatures that bite him. Next, his limbs are lopped off and torn asunder by elephants. He is hurled down from hilltops. He is also held captive either in water or in a cave. Men and women whose lives were built upon indulgence and illicit sex life are put into many kinds of miserable conditions in the hells known as Tamishra, Anta Tamishra, and Rauvara. So, that's most of the population of the United States, right? And plenty of other countries too. So many people, their lives revolve around, let me get on Tinder, right? Let me see who I can date. Oh, let me have an affair on my wife or my girlfriend or whatever, right? So, yeah. So Lord Kapila continued, "My dear mother, it is sometimes said that we experience hell or heaven on this planet, where hellish punishments are sometimes visible on this planet also. After leaving this body, the man who maintained himself and his family members by sinful activities suffers a hellish life, and his relatives suffer also. He goes alone to the darkest regions of hell after leaving the present body, and the money he acquired by envying other living entities is the money with which he leaves this world. Thus, by the arrangement of kinsman is put into a hellish condition to suffer activities like a man who has lost his wealth. Therefore, a person who is very eager to maintain his family and kinsmen simply by black methods certainly goes to the darkest region of hell, which is known as Andatamishra. Having gone through all the miserable hellish conditions, and having passed in a regular order through the lowest form of animal life prior to human birth, and having thus been purged of his sins, one is reborn again as a human being on this earth." Right, so he went through all that, and then he has to do it again. Right? And again, and again, and again, and again. Right? So I had a friend who told me one day that and guess what? That's what you're doing, eternity, right? That's what you've been doing. That's kind of the whole problem is nobody understands that when we die is not the end, right? We have to come back and come back and come back and come back. So I knew somebody who was on death row. He got executed, and his last words were "game over," right? But joke's on him, because that game's not over, right? That game's still playing. So another thing that people retain, yeah, right. So, you know, it's are struggling with like gender identity issues, right? And to assault her. And so she did that. And she didn't want to stop, so she wore diapers, right? She wore diapers, drove all the way across the country, the airport where this other lady was, and then tried to chase her down. And the lady ran from her, got in her car, and she started banging on the window, saying like, "Oh, please give me a ride." And the lady rolled down her window a little bit, and then she pepper sprayed her. And I mean, it's just ridiculous. So she ended up getting arrested, and they had found, you know, she had all kinds of things in her car. You know, this lady and assaulted her, right? Like maybe she was bewildered, and maybe her intelligence was lost, right? And that's because she was so upset that, you know, this man that she was seeing, that she had this great lust for, and now he's seeing some other lady, and this is what she did. So she ended up her career and getting fired from NASA, all because she just couldn't control herself, and she had definitely lost her intelligence for sure. So, let's see. So this is a cute little thing that a devotee wrote. Let's see what his name is, Purushottam Nitai Das, and I really liked it. And this is very much like what we do. It's called Moth to a Flame. The lady in the golden flame looks pretty to the moth. Her fiery smile makes him dance in joy. It's not that she is smiling just at him, but at all. But the moth believes her smile is only for him. And so he, without wasting any moment, runs desperately to be with her. As he inches closer to the golden lady, the golden lady looks much prettier, and he becomes desperate to embrace her. The lady, looking bright yellow, spreads her arms for him, and the moth, with a hope to enjoy unlimited pleasures, jumps into her arms. But immediately his hope turns into a nightmare, happiness into deep agony. His beautiful wings, which allowed him to play with the wind and jump from one plant to another to play with the colorful flowers, is now on fire. He tries hard to come out of the embrace. With teary eyes, he looks at her, but she is indifferent to his pleas. He cries in pain. He tries his best to free himself. Soon he realizes his efforts will go in vain, and so slowly he surrenders himself to her and allows himself to be devoured by her. This lady smiles slyly and spreads her arms to welcome him, who in hope of unlimited pleasure is running towards her to enjoy with her. So that's us. We're that moth. Okay, we are that moth. You know, I mean, we're doing this collectively as a society. You know, everybody know the concept of fast fashion, right? That's a big thing now, right? People are just buying so much clothes. It's poor quality clothes, and you know, trying to keep up with the trends, and then they're getting thrown out. And this is like filling up landfills, and made out of synthetic fibers like polyester, things like that. Incredibly bad for the environment, and they last incredibly long. Also industrial farming, right? We're so, you know, addicted to having cheap, plentiful produce that the nutritional value of our produce in the last 50 years has plummeted dramatically, right? So we're getting so many tomatoes, but we're not getting the nutrients that we need from them. Then plastic pollution. There was just a study that became known about, like, I think February 4th, earlier this month. So the University of New Mexico Health Sciences researchers, they found microplastics in human brains. And They are in our brains at a much higher concentration than any other organ. And even worse, the plastic accumulation appears to be growing over time. And it's increased by 50% over the last 8 years. I mean, that's not a long time. 8 years is not a long time. And even worse than that is that brain tissue from people that have been diagnosed with dementia, they have up to 10 times as everyone else. So this just came out. Well, it's so, it's in our food supplies.
Stuff you drink too.
Everywhere.
Yeah, in our food.
Just found out.
Yeah.
Shoes, clothes, everything.
So anyway, so we're that moth. We're all addicted to this stuff, right? We're just running headlong into that fire.
Go deeper.
Okay, yeah, we can go deeper. I feel like you have an answer for me.
Oh, I didn't, but I could say you just try to control them.
Okay, yeah. Anyone else?
You chance.
You chant? Very good. Okay.
Surrender.
Huh?
Surrender.
Surrender, yeah, these are all great answers. Yes. So the Bhagavad Gita, you want to say?
Me or Mary?
You.
Oh, I was just thinking that you dovetail the desire into other things. So you can't, if we try to push it down or manage it, it's never successful.
Yeah.
So we're desire beings, you take that desire, serving, loving, or, and
Yeah, that's great. That's a great answer. So the Bhagavad Gita says an intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery, right? Which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. And then in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it says, Lord Vishnudev told his sons, my dear boys, of all the living entities who have accepted material bodies in this world, one who has been awarded this human form should not work hard day and night simply for sense gratification. That's what pretty much everybody in the world is doing, right? They're just working hard day and night. So like on the weekends, maybe they can, watch a movie or
Work
You know.
hard to play harder.
yeah, exactly, right? That's the whole, I was thinking about that the other day. That's like, that slogan that so many guys that seem to be addicted to their work say, right? I work hard at night, I play hard, right? Okay, I work really hard so then I can go out on my boat on the weekends and, drink some beers, party with some sexy ladies, right? That's imagining like some banker guy, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, so, yeah, should not work hard day and night simply for sense gratification, which is available even for the dogs and hogs that eat stool. One should engage in penance and austerity to attain the divine position for devotional service. By such activity, his heart is purified, and when one attains this position, he attains eternal blissful life, which is transcendental to material happiness, which continues forever. So, yeah, we want to try to engage in service, in Krishna's service, and that purification will help us go back to our original state, which is, right, we're eternal, bliss and knowledge, right? So I don't know about you, but for the most part, I don't feel like full of bliss and full of knowledge. I feel pretty dumb most of the time and pretty cranky, like I need a nap, I think that's my general state of being. But I'm trying to do some service, so hopefully I can recover that natural state of blissfulness, knowledge, and eternality. So the soul is eternal. The Bhagavad Gita tells us, Krishna says, never was there a time that I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. All right, so I want to tell a story about King Chitraketu. Does anybody know that story? No? All right, good. All right, so King Chitraketu, he was a very nice king. And this was, he's good to his subjects. And he actually had, for those of you that have trouble with one husband or wife, get a load of this. He had 10 million wives. Okay. So he had 10 million wives, but he was good to them, But unfortunately, all 10 million of them were barren. They were not able to have children. And we know from history that's terrible for a king, right? A king needs to have heirs, right? And so the king was very distraught about this. He was always wanting to have a son so he could have an heir. And so he was very sad. And one day, this great sage named Angira, he came by to his house, and he's like, "Oh, I hope, how are things going? I hope everything's going well." But the sage, he knew, he was a sage. He was able to sort of psychically understand things, and he knew that the king was distraught because of this. And so he told the king, "I will give you," and so the king, of course, wanted a son. And so the sage ended up having a big sacrifice. He made a big sacrifice, and he fed the remnants of the food offered in the sacrifice. He gave to the king's kind of most prominent wife, his first wife, and she ate the remnants. And he told him, "O great king, now you will have a son who will become." It became obvious that his wife was pregnant, and he was overjoyed. He was so excited. Finally, he was going to have an heir. And his naturally, he started spending more time with that wife to make sure she was okay and that everything was progressing normally. So she had the baby, and it was his son. And he was so happy, so overjoyed. And so he started spending even more time with her and with his son, and raising him, and just being so, he was just so jubilant. The whole kingdom was rejoicing because the king finally had a son, and his subjects loved him. So, he had 10 million wives, and he was sort of neglecting the other ones. And they started to get a little bit jealous. And they ended up poisoning the little boy, the little prince. And so he died. And this was so heart-wrenching for the king and his wife. And even the whole kingdom was just totally distraught. People were crying and wailing. And and so people were crying and wailing, and everybody was just even the women that had poisoned him, they were crying and wailing too, right? Even though they did it, they were still crying and wailing too, because it was just heart-wrenching. Being so sad, at the loss of his son. So Angira, the great sage, he comes back, and he brings his friend Narada Muni with him. I'm sure a lot of you know who Narada Muni is. If not, I always kind of think of him as almost like a Krishna wandering around the universe. No. And he's just like wandering around the universe and playing music and bringing people towards Krishna, and sometimes instigating things. Okay, maybe all the time instigate things. Anyway, so they come back and they see what's happened, and they try to tell him that the people in our lives, we come together for a short period of time, but then we separate. You know, it's not a permanent relation, and yeah, and so Angira says, when I translate, I gave you only a son who caused you jubilation and lamentation. So we can see that King Chichiketu, he kind of messed up here, right? Like he could have had the supreme knowledge and prevented himself from having all this pain, and then also could have fulfilled the purpose of human life, right, at the same time. But he was so distracted by his material desires that he didn't even ask for that, right? He didn't even think to ask for that.
He wanted multiple sons.
Yeah. So what ended up happening is that Narada Muni was able to bring his son back from the dead. And what his son said was pretty hardcore. So let me see if I can find that so I can read that part for you. Yeah, okay. So by the mystic power of Narada Muni, the living entity re-entered his dead body, and for a short time, re-entered his dead body for a short time and spoke in reply to Narada Muni's request. So this is what he said. According to the results of my fruitive activities, I, the living being, transmigrate from one body to another, sometimes going to the species of the demigods, sometimes to the species of the lower animals, sometimes among the vegetables, and sometimes to the human species. Therefore, in which birth, that would hurt, right? Your child just dies, and they come back, and then they say, I've had so many mothers and fathers, right? I mean, that would be pretty harsh. Even though one living entity becomes connected with another because of a relationship based on bodies that are perishable, the living entity is eternal, born or lost, not the living entity. One that the living entity takes birth or dies. The living being actually has no relationship with so-called fathers and mothers. A certain father and mother, as a result of his past fruitive activities, he has a connection with the body given by that father and mother. Thus, he falsely accepts himself as their son and acts affectionately. After he dies, however, the relationship is finished. Under these circumstances, one should not be falsely involved with jubilation and lamentation. So, Sukadeva Goswami continued, when the conditioned soul in the form of Maharaj Chitraketu's son had spoken in this way and then left, Chitraketu and the other relatives of the dead son were all astonished. Thus they cut off the shackles of their affection, which was due to their relationship with him, and gave up their lamentation. So what do we take from this story? Is it are you supposed to call your mom tomorrow and say, you're not my mother? You're not my mother?
Yeah.
I don't care about you?
No.
Is that what you're going to do that?
It's a big takeaway from this story and kind of the other ones you've said tonight.
Yeah.
Is assets are liabilities.
Okay, yeah. That's true. Yeah, it is true. Does anybody else have any? Yeah, Grace?
Desire is a liability.
Yeah,
And then also, just like how to detach from something that seems almost impossible.
you're asking, or
No, that's.
yeah, that's yeah. And so is that what you should do? Call our moms and say, you're not my mom. I don't love you anymore. Don't call me. No.
There's another possibility that this child, because you get to choose whether you want what lessons you want when you're in that, didn't pick them, and it had to come. And so when we left, it didn't have it didn't fulfill anything that he needed to advance his reincarnation feelings and his verbalization of, of yes, you wanted me, but it wasn't fulfillment in both ways. And that's a lesson again of love. Love again.
Mhm.
Harsh, but it is. I don't know. That's how I see it. So, and I want to ask you this. I always heard, and everything I've ever read was that we interconnect. I'm your mother, next time I'm the father, next time the child is the mother.
Mhm.
Until we learn how complete the circle and feel all the things that are involved in it to be able to move on. And maybe this child was ready to move on and he got pulled back.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, certainly that's true. Yeah, we can do that, but ultimately that's all irrelevant, right? Because we're eternal, right? So even if say you're with the same souls for 100 lifetimes, right? Still,
That's happening to believe, yeah.
you know. So yeah, of course. I mean, there's all sorts of different ways that your karma and things like that can interact, and certainly people reincarnate within the same family. There's all kinds of stories like that. But again, in the terms of eternity, it's irrelevant. I mean, the same with there's so many other lives that we've lived too. We were carrots. We were horses. We were dogs, right? Well, I mean, they all have families too, right? So we were part of so many families, and so the whole point of this isn't to push your family away. Now, am I telling, hey, you and Bala, just call Bala up when he gets back from the bathroom? Don't call him; he's sitting right next to you, and say, oh, that's it, we're finished. No, well, no, of course not, because we're here on this planet, and we have them, and we care about them, right? But we love them in a way that's detached, right? Where we understand that it's temporary, it's not eternal, and that what is eternal is our relationship with Krishna. And so by no means am I saying like, oh, just cut yourself off from all your loved ones. No, we can't live like that. We're social beings, right? I mean, that's really sad and horrible if you had to live that way. That's part of why Srila Prabhupada wanted to make ISKCON, right? So that people could build these loving relationships with one another. Now, why would he do that if we didn't need that, right? No, because we do. We need that. Yeah.
So I think in Christian theology, there's this idea that I think fits really well with this, that every relationship that you have on earth is to help you understand your relationship with God. That's why Krishna is one of the only deities who he comes as a child, and we get to experience that caring for Krishna like a helpless baby. Even though he doesn't need our help, he can slay all those demons. He's got this. But to just see, when you have a kid in the car and you slam on the brakes and you put your arm out, that's Krishna. He doesn't need that, but just to see you have that, he loves that. And I think that that's what these relationships, they're also because of our karma, right? Taking all these spurts, but nothing's ever for just one reason. Krishna has a way of arranging things to where he can transcendentalize all of this.
That's a good word.
And we, Paramatma, to us many times how each one of us is Krishna's favorite. And that does not take away from the fact, as it would if Lalita told all of us in secret, oh, you're my favorite. If we all found out, that would cheapen it.
Yeah.
But with Krishna,
Don't tell my secrets.
It's transcendental because he,
Right.
and so I think instead of cutting off these relationships or kind of slapping us in the face and making it reality, is transcendentalizing it with true knowledge and learning to love this person and seeing them how Krishna sees them, which we can never completely do, but this is Krishna's favorite person. And I think that's the most deeply you can fall in love with someone, is seeing more and more every single day the little nuances that makes them Krishna's favorite.
Oh, that was so beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. See, we want to love each other as we actually are, which is these eternal spirit souls, right? Instead of just loving you because you like, to whatever sports ball team that I like, right? Which is none of them actually.
None of those sports ball teams.
I don't like any of the sports ball teams. And when you think about it, so many of our relationships kind of boil down to that too, Unfortunately, when I moved into the temple, I had a best friend of 25 years. I thought we were best friends. And when I moved into the temple, all of a sudden she wanted nothing to do with me, right? And
You're understanding.
Huh?
That's a fear of understanding.
Yeah, and it made me, I was shocked. It made me really sad because I thought that we were soul friends. That's what I used to say, that we're soul friends. But it turns out, no, I guess we were just, sitting around getting intoxicated, talking about politics friends.
You are soul friends because in part, she gave you something that gave you growth, and you gave her something that gave her growth. So there's good growth or bad growth, and when you turn around and have to release it, but it's not the way you dream it.
No, and I do believe that. Yeah, we certainly did help each other grow in different ways. But unfortunately, it wasn't an eternal relationship, And so yeah.
Guru Deva, we heard him talk about in the material world how friendships, a lot of them are just aligning of anartas.
Right.
And it's like, oh, you don't shoot up cocaine anymore? Like, well,
Yeah,
you're no fun.
fine. My new best friend does.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
But also,
absolutely.
that's you. Everything leads to lessons. Everything leads to awakening. So what you did to him is, and now he has to battle that in his head over and over again to a point where he has to admit where he failed himself. And that's the hardest thing in the world to do, is to admit that you failed yourself.
Yeah.
So at least in my world it is.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, I think it's Jim Carrey that says, I wish everyone would become rich and famous so they can see that it won't make them happy.
Yeah.
That he imagined his life, if I just become rich and famous, I'm going to get that elusive happiness. And then he got all that and wasn't happy.
Yeah.
So he wanted everyone to learn that lesson. It makes me think of this king, that what a boon it was to give him the son, because the lesson is, you have 10 million lives and you've got a kingdom, you're not satisfied.
Right.
Now you just want this one thing, thinking that one thing the boy's going to
Fix
satisfy. So we'll
everything.
give it to you to demonstrate again. These things aren't going to bring you happiness. So,
Right.
but if we put, thank you, put Krishna first, then all those other things can fall into place.
Right.
You can't have happy marriages and children and
Yeah.
fulfilling lives, but if you're not putting Krishna in the head, then those things will just constantly disappear.
That's exactly the kind of point that I was trying to get to eventually, was that yeah, we just need to put Krishna in the center, and then we can have these really nice friendships, really nice family relationships. So we're not advocating, isolating yourself. I heard in the early days of ISKCON, there was some young new devotees, and they would call up their parents and say, you're not my parents anyway, and
I've had so many-
You're not my real dad.
yeah, you're not my real dad. And that's the wrong understanding, for sure. The proper understanding and keep Krishna in the center of those relationships.
And go through the pain knowing that you're going to come out the other side
Yeah,
with something or other that had to be exposed within yourself.
yeah. Because that pain's gonna come, right? That joy is also gonna come. The pain, joy's gonna leave. It's gonna come back. Both, it's coming and going. I know. I've been trying to get the joy to stay, but no. Then it goes, and then the pain comes. But then the joy comes back, and the pain goes away, and then I don't know. I wish it would make up its mind.
What if there was a way to just become indifferent to the dualities of
Exactly. Yeah.
That's the biggest, that's what Buddha found when he sat under that Bodhi tree for all that time. He came out and he learned that it is indifference. It doesn't, none of it really matters. It's where you are consciously with yourself.
Yeah. And that's what we're trying to do as well. So let me end here. I want to ask again. So what is a good death, right? So a good death is one in which we remember Krishna, right? Without fail, right? And so how do we do that? We practice. We chant. We associate with the devotees. And the holy name is so powerful. That's why we chant, right? Because the holy name is so powerful. So I will end with this. This is a quote from the Srimad Bhagavatam, the 6th canto. It says, "The chanting of the holy name of Lord Vishnu is the best process of atonement for a thief of gold or other valuables, for a drunkard, for one who betrays a friend or a relative, for one who kills a brahmana, or one who indulges in sex with the wife of his guru or another superior." Don't do that, guys. Okay.
That's a big one. It's in a lot of the shastras, because you have to think about back in the day, when
Yeah.
you took on a guru, you lived,
Yeah.
with
And a lot of times they had young, beautiful wives, So, okay, it is also the best method of atonement for one who murders women, who murders the king or his father, or for one who slaughters cows, and for all other sinful men. Simply by chanting the holy name of Lord Vishnu, such sinful persons may attract the attention of the Supreme Lord, who therefore considers, because this man has chanted my holy name, my duty is to give him protection. And so doing that, chanting, that's going to help make us indifferent to life's ups and downs, right? We're going to be more equal posed. And with that being said, does everybody here have beads? Everybody has beads? Do you have beads? Do you have beads? You don't have beads?
Mine broke.
Okay,
I was taking them when I'm traveling.
okay, I'll get you some.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? Do you have beads? Alex? All right, you have beads?
You have
All right.
108 fingers? Yeah. I can't keep going back.
All right, so I'll go get you some beads right now, Mary. And so we'll just end there. I had a lot more I wanted to say, but it's like 8:10 after 8, so I think we'll just end there. But yeah,
This is really a good talk.
all right, I hope so.
Yeah.
I'm surprised because I literally only prepared for like 2 hours, which normally I prepare for like a week before one of these things. So, okay. Very good. Hare Krishna. Oh, Mary Sachi.